Billionaires Row is famous for towers that scrape the clouds and sit empty half the year. Homes bought like gold bars by people who barely visit. Now the row is getting one more. But this lot was supposed to be different. It was promised a building unlike anything in the city and turned it down. The real question is whether the newest arrival is headed for the same fate as the rest and what the public got for letting it rise. Start with the newest arrival itself. It comes from Sedesco, a low-profile developer run by the Turkish businessman Demir Sabanci, with a design from OMA, the Dutch firm led by Rem Koolhaas, a 63-story tower reaching about 1,100 feet, clearing the bar for a super tall. Inside, the plan calls for 119 condominiums, averaging close to 2,000 square feet each, a 158-room hotel across floors 2 through 20, and a restaurant of a little over 10,000 square feet in the base. Each of those condos runs nearly triple the size of a typical Manhattan apartment. Hotel rooms take the lower floors and the condos stack above, so the priciest homes sit highest with the widest views. Between 5th and 6th Avenues, the lot opens onto both West 57th and West 58th Street, and nearly every upper floor looks straight at Central Park. OMA gave the design a split personality. The north face, aimed at the park, reads as a clean sheet of glass, while the east face turns to solid concrete, broken only by a narrow triangular slot running up to a sharp point near the crown. Near the summit, the tower steps back into a taper, deliberately shaped to complement its neighbor, 111 West 57th Street, one of the thinnest skyscrapers on Earth. Seen from the street, the result looks competent, polished even. But it isn't the first tower designed for this lot. A wider plan almost landed here back in 2015, when Mark Foster Gage, an assistant dean at Yale's School of Architecture, drew a 102-story tower topping out around 1,492 feet. Around the office, it picked up the nickname Khaleesi after the Dragon Queen from Game of Thrones, while critics reached for a grander comparison and called it the Michelangelo Tower. Gage skipped glass altogether. He wrapped the building in carved limestone-tinted concrete, layered on hydroformed bronze sheets and sculpted ornament running up the corners, and gave a private balcony to every one of its 91 residential units, each floor unique to its owner. High up, around the 64th floor, he drew a sky lobby with a 2-story ballroom, retail, and a restaurant opening onto 4 massive cantilevered balconies pushing out over the street. Like 432 Park Avenue, a few blocks east, it chased the same ultra-rich buyers paying for heights and a view of the park, only dressed in carved stone and bronze instead of glass. Computer-controlled cutters could shape stone in weeks that once took masons years, so a facade as busy as a Gothic cathedral suddenly penciled out on a modern budget, and Gage leaned hard on that idea. He also framed the whole thing as a shot at the row itself, arguing those other super talls were just tall boxes wrapped in glass, and none of it counted as real design. He unveiled it at the tail end of that year, a year after 157 opened and as 432 Park was being completed, so his tower answered the row rather than starting it. When the renderings hit the internet, reactions split fast. Half the crowd loved the sheer nerve of it, half called it gaudy. A developer had commissioned the design, then added up what it cost to carve a skyscraper, quietly shelved it, and the Khaleesi never got past those renderings. Architecture circles still trade the images as one of the great what-ifs of the New York skyline, a reminder of how strange and how different this stretch of the city could have looked. The tower that did get built here took a very different path to the sky, and it started on the ground by swallowing most of a block. New York ties how big you can build to how much ground you own, a rule called floor area ratio, so a developer chasing a super tall has to buy up the neighbors first. Sedesco started early. 50 West 58th Street in 2012 for $71.5 million, then 41 West 57th in 2018 for $80 million, then $77.5 million in 2023 for a 13-story office building at 37 West 57th that pushed the assemblage almost 88,000 square feet larger. Pulling it together took more than a decade and roughly $250 million, one address at a time, and then the low-rise buildings came down, leaving a long, fenced-off gap on one of the priciest blocks in the city. Older buildings have been vanishing from this block for years. Right next door at 35 West 57th, a French-style townhouse from 1891, handed to a Vanderbilt heir as a wedding gift, still hints at what the street used to be. That mansion belongs to a different developer, the Soloviev firm, whose owner pushed out a long-time tenant, the American Health Bar, after roughly 2 decades on the ground floor, then filed permits to tear the building down. The permits are years old now. The restaurant is gone, but the mansion is still standing, a 130-year-old holdout under a demolition order that never came. Even with the block assembled, Sedesco wanted more building than the lot legally allowed, and a 2021 city law called Zoning for Accessibility gave it a way to get there, letting developers add up to 20% more floor area if their site sits within 500 feet of a subway station and they pay to make that station accessible. The 57th Street stop on 6th Avenue fell inside that band, its nearest entrance well within the 500 feet. The station carried the F and M lines and thousands of riders a day, yet for decades, anyone in a wheelchair had no way down to the platform. Only about a third of New York's roughly 470 subway stations offer full elevator access, which shuts most of the network to anyone who can't manage the stairs. The MTA has been under a court order to fix that since a 2022 settlement, but the target, 95% of stations accessible, runs all the way out to 2055, and a single elevator in a century-old subway costs tens of millions once you count the digging, the wiring, and the machine room. So Sedesco took the trade. It agreed to build 2 elevators, street to mezzanine, mezzanine to platform, plus a machine room, new communications gear, fare gates, fresh curb cuts at 8 nearby corners, and $9.83 million set aside up front for future upkeep and eventual replacement. In return, the city handed it 53,029 square feet of extra floor space, a little over an acre, worth several $100 million on Billionaires Row, with the City Planning Commission signing off in December 2021. And here's the part that flips the usual order. City rules block Sedesco from using that bonus space until the elevators are actually open to riders. The public's half of the bargain had to come first. Sedesco was also the first private developer ever to use the program, turning this station into a test case for whether private money can patch the gaps the public budget keeps missing. By the MTA's own math, the deal saved the agency around $43 million it would have spent building and maintaining those elevators itself. Then, summer of 2026 delivered the twist. The elevators are already finished. They opened in June, bringing the city to around 160 accessible stations, and the 57th Street stop serves wheelchair users every morning now. The tower that unlocked the whole deal hasn't even broken ground. People argue this trade hard, and both sides have a real case. One camp sees a giveaway, a developer spending under $30 million on a couple of elevators, then walking off with an acre of air that can carry more than a dozen 8-figure apartments, worth many times what the elevators cost, a bargain price for a fortune in the sky. There's also a fair question hanging over it. Once the ribbon's cut, who's actually watching how the MTA holds up its end? Plenty of people have asked the obvious one. Is the upkeep money real, or a promise that quietly evaporates? Here, the paperwork answers back. Sedesco didn't just build the elevators. It paid the cost of their upkeep and eventual replacement to the MTA up front, in advance, and the MTA owns them outright now. What nobody can promise is whether that pot stretches far enough to keep century-old subway elevators running for the decades this deal is meant to outlast. To another set of people, this is government finally working. Riders needed elevators the MTA couldn't afford, got them years ahead of any public budget, and the city came out ahead without spending a public dollar on construction. Both readings hold up at once, which is exactly why the deal keeps getting fought over. But step back from this one deal, and it fits a bigger pattern. Across the row, these apartments sell as investments, not homes, much of the money moving through anonymous LLCs that keep the buyer's name off the public record. The prices are almost hard to say out loud. One buyer paid $238 million for a penthouse a block over at 220 Central Park South, still the most expensive home ever sold in the country. And you can see the imbalance from the park itself. On a bright afternoon, the shadows of these towers stretch north across Central Park's lawns, thrown by apartments with the lights off and no one home. On the benches those shadows fall across are the New Yorkers who'll never set foot upstairs, in a city where a place to live is the one thing always in short supply. The city has started to push back. In July 2026, it began mailing tax notices to owners of second homes worth more than $5 million, a direct shot at exactly this kind of buyer. Down at street level, meanwhile, the retail still struggles to fill. So that's where this lot landed, offered the one tower that could have broken the mold, and handed, instead, another copy of the thing the whole city already complains about. So argue it out with me. Was the trade fair? 2 subway elevators the whole city can use in exchange for a luxury tower most of the city never will? Drop your verdict below. Steal of the century, or the smartest trade the MTA has pulled off in years. And if you want more of The Row, we've broken down its neighbours before. Subscribe for more Mega Build stories.